Well, Scott, Mary Alice, this is really a day to take stock of what's left here after this two-alarm blaze ripped through this building. Again, as you pointed out, built in the 1800s, just rubble in the center now. And in fact, because this area is rather hazardous for the public, with all that debris back there, they've actually put these barricades up here. This is just off of South Park and Mississippi right here. Now, we can tell you it took up to 60 firefighters and 20 pieces of equipment to actually deal with this fire. It broke out just before 8 p.m., was under control about 2 a.m. The cause is still under investigation, we learned today. Despite intense flames and heavy smoke, there were no injuries. The central portion of the building complex reduced to rubble, as we've been pointing out, twisted beams and bricks, as well as some of the walls from the walls that actually did come down. But the city, with the idea and under pressure to save the structure, wants to do what they call an emergency stabilization instead of demolition, a complicated, perhaps expensive process to keep the remaining walls up.
If it's possible, we would get down to more of a shell and attach lateral bracing throughout that shell at multiple locations, and then tie back at the front and back of that, going out to down to ground anchors to support that. So that's something we're looking at.
Now, as they were talking about that approach, they did stress that this is a, quote, possible approach, and a lot of this was very preliminary because they've got a lot of study and research to do with that building. They said they do have a 2-year-old engineering study. So there is, again, a lot of water-soaked debris back there that they're going to have to remove to stabilize the structure even further. Now, this building, again, has been the center of a major eminent domain battle between the city and the owner of the structure. And for that part of the story, I'm going to hand it over to Channel 2's Nate Benson. Nate, what's going on there?
Yeah, hey there. Thank you, Ron. Like you said, the city of Buffalo and building owner Daryl Carr have been in the middle of this eminent domain battle in court since May of 2023. But the city actually began those eminent domain proceedings in September 2022. It had to be a whole formal process with public comment periods and a formal resolution and approval. And then, of course, Mayor Brown signing on as well. Now, Carr was issued a demolition permit by the city in January 2023, but the city immediately filed a lawsuit to prevent that demolition. Carr bought the building in 2008 and has been in housing court several times over the last 14 years because of violations. Council member Mitch Nowakowski pushed the council and Mayor Brown to use eminent domain to save the building, and this is actually the first time in Mayor Brown's 5 terms that the city has used the eminent domain tool against a developer. Now, Carr wants to build a 55-story tower of condos, apartments, and retail spaces in this location at the corner of Illinois and South Park Avenue. Of course, anything that big would need many city code variances in order to even be built. Now, ever since the fire broke out at 8 o'clock last night, there has been a lot of finger pointing between Councilmember Mitch Nowakowski, city officials, and Daryl Carr over who is to blame for the fire.
I had a court order. You know, the city court gave me a demolition order, and now that was appealed by the city, and that's still in the county court. So there's still litigations pending on this whole thing. And then since they lost the demo case, because that was a trial, right, at the city level, when they lost it, that's when Ms. Nowakowski said, hey, let's use something else. Let's do eminent domain. And we can take the properties from him.
The court proceeding is stopping any emergency demolition of this property. In fact, that's why this property has not been demolished at this point. The owner has wanted to demolish these historic structures, some of the most historic structures in the entire city of Buffalo, and the administration and the city council have said, no, we're not going to allow that to happen.
And now this fire complicates matters even more. City engineers, as Ron said, will have to stabilize this building as they wait for a decision in the court regarding eminent domain. And within the last few hours, I spoke to Gwen Howard. She's the Preservation Board Chair for the City of Buffalo. She says it's certainly possible that these exterior walls that you see behind me could be salvaged and the internal portions of the building could be redeveloped. She cited the Market Arcade in downtown Buffalo as a recent example of a similar type of restoration project. project. But until that eminent domain ruling comes down, which could be this week or next, we're told, it's going to then determine who owns the building. Will it be Darrell Carr or the city of Buffalo? And then what happens next? Scott and Mary Alice?
All right, I know you guys will continue to follow it. Nate, thank you so much for that report. And of course, with the old Pink Flamingo Bar and Grill being demolished after that fire that occurred on Monday, Buffalo has had an awful lot of history go up in flames in just 1 week.
Channel 2's Rob Hackford has more on how much this may impact our community. Rob?
Yeah, Scott and Mary Alice, preservation groups are speaking out because they're worried that Buffalo could lose its two oldest buildings on the waterfront.
This basically served our waterfront industry.
Paul McDonald, president of the Campaign for Greater Buffalo, has been part of efforts to save the recently fire-damaged Cobblestone buildings for over a decade because of their historical significance during the era of the Erie Canal.
This was a blacksmith shop.
The buildings, he says, were part of Buffalo's boom and later housed a bakery that supplied bread to Union soldiers. They are now the last two pre-Civil War buildings that once dominated the waterfront.
This whole area was littered with buildings that basically supported the shipping industry here in Buffalo. Boilers, metallurgists.
McDonald says the Campaign for Greater Buffalo sued the owner in 2011, trying to stop early neglect. He says the fire is part of a pattern of problems through the years and why preservationists are now doubling down.
Buffalo's quote-unquote renaissance has happened because of our historic architecture. There's not a lot of new construction in Buffalo, but there is a lot of historic rehab.
Gwen Howard is chair of the Buffalo Preservation Board.
We've been spending millions and millions and millions of dollars to recreate the Cobblestone district with new buildings to replace what has been lost. But here we have the final remaining buildings, the only ones from that period.
Everything is stable underneath that.
McDonald, again from the Campaign for Greater Buffalo, believes the building can be saved, but says it might take a new owner and developer to do it.
This building is salvageable. Although there is fire damage, if you look at the walls are true. Selective demolition, saving the existing brick, can bring this building back, and we've seen it happen.
Yeah, preservation groups are celebrating the city's decision to not go with emergency demolition. They're looking forward to having that additional time to assess the building, weigh in and give their advice as well as they look to make this building a permanent part of Buffalo's waterfront. Reporting live and on your side along South Park Avenue, Rob Hackford, Channel 2 News.
All right, Rob, thank you. And be sure to stay with 2 on your side as we will have continuing coverage of this story starting with Channel 2 News tonight at 11 o'clock.